Welcome to the Complete Beginner's Guide to City Skylines 2. Together, we will lose so much money that we will completely break the budget and struggle to survive. Our solution will follow a three-part strategy focused on function, data, and design. Whether you are new to the game or looking for inspiration, click the like button and let me know what you want to see in this series in the comments. My name is College Builder, your friendly college dean, and this is my CS2 Beginner's Guide, otherwise known as Intro 101. Welcome to class. To get started, we will select a fresh map from Paradox Mods. We will use the incredible Victoria BC Map Rural Edition by the talented mapmaker Poplar Ponderosa. Once installed, click New Game and then Custom Maps. This is a temperate North American map in the Pacific Northwest. It is a large buildable area, all outside connections and natural resources, making it terrific for beginners. Since this will be a port city, let's give it the not-so-original name of Porter. Let's play with natural disasters turned on to add challenge. This will be a vanilla game without mods that impact game mechanics, so that you can play along with me. However, I will use a few visual enhancing mods to show what I am doing clearly. These visual mods won't impact gameplay if you prefer strictly vanilla. The white zonable area can be challenging to see through, so we will use the zone color changer to make the unzoned areas completely transparent. I also find it difficult when the info view automatically turns on. We will use the toggle overlays mod to prevent this automatic change, keeping everything easier to see. While we are at it, let's use the Map Texture Replacer mod to import custom map textures, along with the Volturia map theme renewed. This slightly changes the game's visual appearance, but will not impact gameplay. Finally, the visuals and shadows in CS2 are just a tad dark for my preference. To adjust them, let's install the Lumina mod to brighten everything up. Make sure Enable Lumina Volume is checked, and then adjust the sliders to your liking. You can see my settings on the screen, but ultimately what you choose is personal preference. As we start the city of Porter, we begin with the concept of function. You must ensure your city works, that it functions as a city should. You will not progress in the game if your city does not function. It doesn't matter if it's pretty, it just has to be operational. Functionality requires outside connections, so we will start in the middle and ensure our build connects to the national highway. Checking natural resources is critical because early game farms and mining help balance the budget. If you want to extract groundwater, then be mindful of groundwater deposits. And, of course, wind direction is essential for managing air pollution. Understanding your map is key to getting a functioning city up and running. We can also identify an outside power connection and outside water and sewage. I love these because they allow us to build fewer services at the start. After exploring the starting tile, it's time to get building. We need local streets to function, and they must link to our outside road connections. Let's build a simple grid, with each block 200 by 96 meters. Since grids sometimes break the zoning, I like to turn off Snap to Guidelines, Snap to Building, and Snap to Zone Grid. Building roads is our first functional requirement. This grid is the starting point from which everything else follows, and which ultimately connects to the outside world. Of course, we don't want a national highway in the middle of town, so let's build an avenue to establish the outside connection. This connection is essential for citizens to move to the city. We will extend our 200 by 96 meter grid until it intersects the avenue. As we cross to the other side, we see the first place our grid breaks. When we say the grid breaks, we mean our zoning squares do not neatly line up. This can usually be fixed by redrawing one or more of the roads on the block. Sometimes we must repeat this process to keep our zoning areas tidy. Let's continue expanding the grid to our city limit. In some places, intersections get complicated, but using the simple curve tool allows us to blend the grids together. Remember, we are not worried about making things pretty, we are just implementing basic functionality. It's time to place zones, our third functional requirement. Zones are for living, working, and shopping. We can start by bulk zoning low-density residential. When citizens arrive, our fourth functional requirement becomes urgent. We need power, water, and sewer to keep these citizens. Let's extend our grid towards the high-voltage power lines. Building a transformer station allows us to connect to the low-voltage power under our roads. Since this map has an external power connection, we don't need to build our own power source immediately. We do, however, need to connect water and sewer. The external connection for these functional needs allows us to skip the investment in infrastructure. Let's continue zoning, adding a commercial area which creates jobs and places to shop. Grain farming provides raw materials and a few more jobs. It's okay to place a farm in the middle of town for convenience. The town just needs to grow. We can always relocate later once our budget is under control. Let's zone our first industrial manufacturing to give those raw materials a destination. Let's also zone more residential blocks. We initially use the automatic fill tool, but those blocks look generic. My preferred approach is to manually alternate zone types and lot depth and width. This creates a more natural look and avoids building repetition. We've reached our first milestone, Tiny Village. This provides a development point, expansion permits, and unlocks several new roads, services, and data options. It also gives our fifth essential functional item, healthcare. While services can be imported, I find a lack of healthcare in town significantly impacts your citizens' happiness and well-being. Let's place that small clinic. The city of Porter is off to a great start, but there is much more to do. For that, we will need data. Our first important data source is traffic, which is visually represented on your roads. We can already see heavy traffic on our main avenue. Let's spend our first development point, unlocking advanced road services. Using the traffic light tool, we can right-click on an intersection to remove the traffic light. We will do this down our central avenue to remove lights and prioritize through traffic. We also see various notification icons popping up. This icon indicates our farm doesn't have enough workers and operates inefficiently. In other words, the data says we need more citizens. Nearby, we have multiple Hearst notifications, meaning deceased citizens are waiting to be picked up. Paying attention to notification icons is critical. However, our third data source, the budget, says we are losing money, so adding services may be challenging. Sometimes, the data pulls you in different directions. We need more workers, but don't have enough services for the current population and are rapidly losing funds. Which do you prioritize? Thankfully, we have enough money in the bank, so it's okay to spend some and let our budget take a hit. We have reached our next milestone, Small Village. Let's use our new development points to unlock highways, allowing us to move the highway and expand our grid. This highway is temporary, since the current connection is just for functionality. We want citizens to move in, but we must keep expanding the grid. This spot on the outskirts of town should be a good place for our cemetery. But our citizens also need an education. We lack educated workers. Placing our elementary school gives a boost in happiness. The happiness meter is our fourth data source, providing a broad overview of our citizens' desires. Clicking on a building like the school, we can see the impact of citizen happiness on its efficiency. The data tells us we need more citizens. Our fifth data source is the demand meter, which you can see in the bottom toolbar or expand for more detail. So let's continue zoning, adding medium-density residential and row housing. We have strong demand for low density, but medium density will bring citizens faster and help balance the budget more quickly. Bringing more citizens will also fill vacant jobs, so services operate efficiently. We can easily watch the data snapshots in the lower toolbar as we zone, reporting the progress towards our goals. It looks like we've reached milestone 3, Large Village. Once we unlock fire and police, citizens will ask for them. If we don't provide them, it will negatively impact their happiness. Data source number 6, the information views, provides multiple overlay options, for example, where we lack fire service or police. The info views can show you what is happening with granular detail. Hopefully, we can make up for the cost of building a fire station by adding more industrial blocks. Our industry is critical, given how much money we are losing. To help slow the losses, let's reduce our budget for healthcare, as that is our single most significant expense. We can also reduce education expenses. To balance our budget, we should examine our production deficits. The production infographic shows we have a wheat surplus but are importing everything else. Imported goods and services cost our citizens more due to the distance they travel, so making them locally is cost-effective. For example, we currently import our power, but locally produced power is cheaper. We can build a road from town to a suitable place for power. The air pollution info view shows that the wind here blows away from the city, so let's place a small coal power plant. With so much power, we will export our excess and hopefully make some profit. But have we destroyed our city? It appears we'll soon be broke. While all 7 data sources are essential, saving Porter from financial ruin requires particular attention to the budget. The budget drives most early game decisions. We can focus on production deficits by adding more farms. This will make resources cheaper, improving company profitability. We also need more residents to fill those jobs and provide us with tax revenue. Early in the game, I go back and forth, adding a few jobs, then more citizens, and so on. Our power plant is fully staffed and earning trade fees, so we have made a little progress on our budget. But we can do better if we work through our remaining production deficits. For example, a rock quarry provides natural resources for manufacturing and helps citizens upgrade their homes affordably. Adding jobs and citizens is important, but you will notice our demand meter is starting to take a hit across all zone categories. Adding zones is not enough. We must also meet citizens' needs and improve happiness. Let's slow our losses further by temporarily reducing the fire budget. I don't like cutting services since this will impact happiness, but sometimes this is the best option. We are striking a balance between budget and citizen satisfaction. We can close production deficits with more farms. The cotton farm must be placed on fertile land. Our most significant remaining deficit is coal, since we import 20 tons a month to operate the power plant. Thankfully, we have an ore deposit nearby. Keeping the natural resource info view on helps place the ore mine to ensure its maximal efficiency. The production data updates quickly, showing we are closing deficits from the coal mine and farms. And now, for the first time, we are making some money. We can increase our education and healthcare budgets, which are critical for citizen happiness. To continue growing, we need to focus on their desires and raise the happiness meter. Adding the elementary school playground will improve well-being in the area. Bumping up our healthcare spending will also help. This is the balancing act. We add to our growing population and incrementally improve services. Let's add a small station, which will unlock Milestone 4, Grand Village. This stage unlocks our parks menu and brings more development points. It also brings more desires we need to fill. Our budget is improving because we are playing things safe, keeping an eye on production while growing the city and only increasing services slowly. I realize this practical approach is not always fun, but we are working hard to overcome our budget losses. Thankfully, Milestone 4 unlocked low-density office zones. And indeed, for the first time in Porter, we have demand for offices. Office demand means we have educated citizens, and offices generate substantial revenue. Now that we can zone offices, I like to consider the balance between industry and office. In fact, I like to zone some offices in the middle of my industrial zones. Milestone 4 also unlocked low-rent housing, which provides the first option to meet high-density demand. Keep an eye on the demand meter. It is important to understand what factors are increasing or decreasing demand. We've reached a point where we really need to address citizen leisure. To do this, we will build some small parks. We can use the leisure info view as a guide, showing us how much coverage we get from each small park. Let's add several, trying to cover as much of Porter as we can, but also being mindful that it will impact the budget. We have lots of demand, so let's prepare for more manufacturing jobs on the other side of town. Building out a new section of grid will give us space for these revenue-generating buildings. Our industrial buildings produce tangible goods, while our offices produce intangible ones. Both are essential for increasing our revenue. Office, commercial, and industrial demand seems to be consumed quickly right now, but it does feel like we are making progress. We have been very practical as we closely monitored the budget and micromanaged our services. We have done this by following all 7 sources of data, closing production deficits, looking at info views, following the demand meter, and responding to citizen needs. And being practical has paid off. Our budget is in much better shape, allowing us to increase our services. But why do people want to live in Porter? What brings them joy from the daily grind? These are questions we need to answer if we want to continue our expansion. We will shift our emphasis from the budget to the happiness meter. Happiness has always been on our minds, for example, every time we thought about services. But until now, happiness has taken a back seat. We can start to make an impact if we increase our leisure coverage. We definitely need more parks. We can make a bigger impact by spending development points to unlock our sports parks and place a basketball court. Of course, every park we add costs money, meaning we need more jobs and citizens. With the budget looking good, let's return our services to 100% capacity. This will have a significant impact on citizen happiness. Traffic should not be ignored when considering happiness because all these new residents are filling our roads. Traffic is visibly increasing on our Central Avenue. Let's widen the intersection to our second industrial area to handle more capacity. We will turn off traffic lights down the Second Avenue to prioritize through traffic. Because we have placed industrial zones in multiple locations, we should be able to avoid any major truck bottlenecks. As we consider citizen happiness, let's think about the best use of land. For example, we place some farms near the center of town, but I think it's time to move them and repurpose this prime real estate. Let's take a bridge across the river where we have lots of fertile soil. Our citizens are in the middle of the city where our parks and other services should be. Keeping services close to the residents will have the most significant impact on happiness. It's okay to move these farms a bit further away as citizens can drive to work. We just want to ensure that we don't impact our production levels. As we move the farms out from the center, we need to keep all natural resources covered. If you've been paying attention, our happiness meter has been hovering around the top 2 spots. Our citizens are mostly happy, and the good news is that we have strong demand. But I think there is more we can do to improve overall satisfaction. With Milestone 5, Tiny Town, we unlock mixed-use housing, internet, and mail service. More on these soon. But first, our roads are getting run down. This impacts happiness because it creates accidents and slows traffic. The data tells us we need to build a road maintenance depot. It's an expensive service, one we have put off building, but our budget can now sustain it. Every bit we do to improve traffic helps push the happiness meter up to the top spot. Better connections from manufacturing jobs to residences shorten commute times. More commercial zones provide places to buy goods. Extending our avenue provides a better flow of truck traffic. I know it's expensive, but I think we should relocate our cemetery. We placed this down at a time when the city was developing, and we didn't have a sense of how this area would be used. Moving it allows us to widen the street to an avenue. This will help with the general traffic flow to our first industrial area. Let's also remove unnecessary traffic lights. We can now upgrade this area, creating a larger, more appropriate intersection with a light to handle traffic flow. For the smaller roads that intersect the main avenue, I think it's time we turn off left-hand turns and the ability to drive straight through. This will help prioritize our main traffic, reducing cross-traffic turns that back things up and keeping turning focused on the major intersections. We have made many improvements. The budget is in good shape, happiness has been improving, and we have addressed traffic needs. In the next lesson, we will zoom out a bit and focus more on the theory of our city, which I call design. Functionality was about just getting things to work. Data was about the nuts and bolts and fine-tuning the day-to-day lives of our citizens. With design, we look at the big picture, viewing the structure of our city with a wider lens. The first aspect of design is context. In urban planning, contextual design refers to design that takes into account the surroundings. including the environment, heritage, culture, and community. By contrast, other planning theories might follow their own values and goals, imposing a particular approach regardless of the surroundings. My own approach is contextual, with a particular emphasis on the natural environment. In fact, throughout this build, we have been carefully paying attention to the natural features as we have built our grid. Notice the way our three different grids come together. Each section of the grid is oriented more or less with its closest coast. Whenever I start building a city, I look at the environmental context, a river or mountain, a lake or forest, and think about how the city is structured within, around, or against those natural features. Environmental context has been our guide and will continue to be as we build the city and the region. The second aspect of design is value. What do the people of your city care about? What matters to them? We have not talked much about values, but that is about to change. This city cares about technology, about building a city for the future. We will add in some internet coverage right in the middle of town. But what other ways will their technology value impact city planning? They also care about their citizens' well-being, ensuring that people are housed and fully employed. This is where we move from the macro, the wider lens, to the micro, looking at the data. We see that our unemployment is very low, and as long as this remains a value, we will keep an eye on it. Other values held by city planners in Porter include creating a walkable city, protecting the environment, and promoting education. We have mostly ignored each of these as we let functionality and data guide us. Since our budget is solid, we can turn to values and correct some of our earlier decisions. Our industrial area, for example, has not been respectful of the environment, but it has helped fuel early growth. This brings us to the third aspect of design, history. Every city and region has a backstory. That history has shaped city development and planning. In Porter's history, an early emphasis on industrial manufacturing gave way to a desire to protect the natural beauty around them. City planners began emphasizing denser development and walkability, encouraging the construction of row houses, low-rises, and mixed-use zones. Remember, if you are building based on a real-life location or region, you probably want to understand some actual history and how that would have influenced the city's design. The fourth design aspect I call citizen flow. This is how people move about your city, whether they do so easily or are frustrated in gridlock. Do they commute across town to work or just walk around the corner? Looking at citizen flow is not micromanaging traffic, but thinking about the design of how people move about. Citizen flow includes your road hierarchy. Road hierarchy requires you to consider roads based on their function and capacity and how they fit together. For example, local roads will have lower capacity and move people within their neighborhood. Collectors will collect people from local roads and move them from one neighborhood to another. Arterials are even higher capacity and often have some limited access. They allow for longer distance travel. Our central avenue is like this as we have limited cross-traffic and left-hand turns at the minor intersections. Highways or interstates have the largest capacity, fastest speeds, and allow for much longer trips. It's time for us to add highway-level functionality to our hierarchy. Until now, trips originating off the map must pass through the middle of town, whether stopping or just passing through. This is incredibly inefficient and adds unnecessary traffic to our avenue. A highway will allow some traffic to bypass the city or bring vehicles closer to their final destination. I had a particular strip of land in mind and left it open so that we can build here easily. Of course, historically, this land was probably developed and buildings needed to be removed to make way for the highway. This stretch helps us get going and gives us the final step in our hierarchy. Let's connect the highway to our arterial with a simple diamond interchange, or at least half of one. We have unlocked the 6th milestone, Boomtown. This is excellent news as we are still growing. Our 5th design element is style. This primarily applies to architecture, although some road, vehicle, and planning aspects fall into it. Style is what gives our city its overall look. City Skylines 2 makes it effortless to choose a particular look and feel, such as a North American or European theme. The new region asset packs allow you to take style further, creating a particular country and its history. What should we think about Porter style? Our context gives us some clues. We are located in the Pacific Northwest of North America, either in the United States or Canada. History also helps us. We started with an industrial focus but are moving towards a city of the future, guided by environmental values, walkability, education, and technology. With all of this in mind, our style will be eclectic. We have historic buildings in the North American theme dating back to the 1920s and 30s. These include row housing, medium density, and mixed use. Additionally, we have modern-looking European-themed buildings. Our service buildings are relatively modern. Notice that we have mainly been using service buildings from the Modern Architecture or Urban Promenades creator packs. These styles belong in a future-oriented, environmentally friendly city. We will discuss our final design aspect shortly, but first I want to connect function, data, and design. Although we have progressively moved through each facet, I don't want to create a false impression that this is linear or that you should consider these aspects separately. At every stage of this build, we have moved from one to the other and back again. The micro details inform the big picture and vice versa. When building a city, it is helpful to take a holistic view. For example, think about traffic. In the early stages, we talked about function, connecting the roads so that the city just worked and our citizens could get from point A to point B. However, looking at function required us to examine our traffic data, whether visually represented on the streets or in the info view. At the same time, I considered the environment's context, how the grid would sit within the area, the city's values, how history shaped the design, how these choices impact citizen flow, and the style. In turn, I continue to think about whether it was all functioning. A holistic view means we constantly think about these aspects and how they impact one another. Of course, you don't have to have it all figured out up front. Sometimes a decision leads to a surprise, and you decide partway through that the building style will change or that the data is leading you in a different direction. That is okay too. The point is that these elements should all hang together, and the influence is not to be one-directional. Speaking of changing your mind, a fun part of city progression is redevelopment. We have reached a stage of our game where the budget is strong and happiness has significantly improved. This allows us to redevelop parts that we have already built. For example, many of these early residential blocks with low density can be rezoned to medium density and row houses. Some redevelopment will happen with our roads. For example, we might discover an intersection is backed up and would benefit from a turning lane. In other cases, we might change zone types altogether. Here, I am replacing some low-density commercial and office zones with the urban promenades mixed-use zones. These green roof buildings improve walkability and move us towards our environmentally friendly city of the future. Sometimes redevelopment happens when we look at our data and see a service building is at full capacity. Our high school seems wholly maxed out and would benefit from an expansion. We can consider where we want to preserve open spaces as part of our redevelopment. Our environmental context is the Pacific Northwest, and our values include ecological protection. As such, we should preserve some open spaces with trails and trees. The trails provide shortcuts to encourage pedestrians. The point is that it's okay to redevelop blocks or entire neighborhoods in your city as you move through the game. It can be helpful to figure out 3 to 4 core values your city holds and work towards them, allowing your city to redevelop to achieve your goals. It's okay if you don't have them finalized at the start. The whole point of redevelopment is that your city evolves, either because the needs of your citizens have changed, because the design goals have changed, or both. In this case, our modern medical clinic seems backed up. The ambulances are just not moving. Here, original design choices give way to more pressing needs. We'll relocate our clinic to the middle of the block and see if that helps. In doing so, we've unlocked milestone 7, Busy Town. Let's mirror the block with the high school across from it, building out pedestrian paths to allow for ease of movement. We can add mixed-use buildings to keep residences close to jobs and shopping. A park will help with leisure time, and trees will give it a natural feel. It is easy to fall into a redevelopment trap where you fill every little spot with buildings. However, when I redevelop, I prefer to consider what spaces I can leave open, or how to open up previously filled spaces. How can I spread things out rather than keeping them crammed together? This is why design matters so much, and that you don't simply follow the data. Thinking about design allows you to consider context, history, values, citizen flow, and style. Of course, your city's values might focus on fitting in as many citizens as possible, but that should be your decision and not the default. We are now ready for our final design aspect. It is not the most important, but this aspect is critical in order to break out of dull, repetitive cities. This is what I call aesthetics. Getting used to City Skylines 2 requires understanding data and making things work. When considering design from an aesthetic standpoint, you step away from function to focus on beauty. You could have a perfectly functioning city that meets citizens' needs, but that was not pleasing to look at. Or, by contrast, you could have a gorgeous city that didn't function well at all. When starting a new city, I will consider my aesthetic goals from the beginning, particularly with regard to context and style. However, regardless of how I start, I often rethink beauty as I go along. For example, when I enter a redevelopment or expansion phase. I am currently thinking about what will make Porter aesthetically pleasing as I expand near the industrial area. Endless factories are boring. Let's create some paths and natural infill against the industrial zones. Open natural areas add an aesthetic component to an otherwise dull urban landscape. Of course, we never stop thinking about functioning and our data. A check of our education system shows that we are woefully ignoring education, which is one of our values. We will replace our small school with a much larger and modern-looking urban elementary school. Definitely a service building for the future. Redevelopment allows us to think about design and bring in our city's values. It also creates an opportunity to think about the aesthetics of this area. We can add walking paths and greenery rather than filling the open space. The small addition helps to transform space around the school and enhance an otherwise dense area. We can continue this approach as we grow, adding residences closer to our highway but leaving a buffer zone. The buffer helps block out some of the highway noise. It also creates an opportunity to add natural elements. In doing so, we are thinking about the city's beauty and promoting our environmental value. We will repeat this format as we work our way along the highway. This allows us to grow our city, adding residents, but it also protects some openness so that not every square inch is filled with buildings. Our design approach creates layers of varying densities. We are not filling every block with medium density, but instead creating pockets of denser buildings mixed with lower density and then tapering outwards. The reasons for this might be connected to the history of town development, but it could also simply be an aesthetic choice. Pedestrian paths through the open space continue to promote walkability. We are trying to be holistic in our approach, considering all our design aspects as we grow or redevelop. The pollution notification icon is helpful. We built a residential building too close to our manufacturing. Let's redevelop some of the nearby industry with low-density office space. This will keep jobs close but help push back the most polluting buildings. This is a continual challenge for cities that want walkability. Some space usages feel incompatible if they are too close together. Our leisure availability looks good, but as we think about aesthetics, we can consider other parks we want to add. Let's remove some homes and create new open space near our elementary school. I imagine a ribbon of parks, paths, and trees winding through this residential neighborhood, making it easier to walk to the school. Considering the place's history, some older homes may have been torn down to make way for new paths and parks. Or perhaps these small walking parks were built into the neighborhood expansion plan from the beginning. Either way, we are creating less dense neighborhoods to add variety, beauty, and walkability. Our value of a green city of the future is now starting to appear across the town. We will continue to add new mixed-use commercial and office zones along our central avenue, ensuring that jobs are close to where our citizens live. A check of our production data shows that we might benefit by setting up a forestry zone. This could seem controversial in a part of the country that wants to protect the environment. However, trees are a renewable resource, and many parts of the Pacific Northwest utilize forests for local production or export. The trick is not to go overboard, but to be judicious in how much we extract. We can think more about this as the city expands in a future episode. Our residents are still slightly polluted, so let's remove more manufacturing and add office space. As our highway leaves town, we can see a bottleneck. Let's unlock roundabouts and create a better intersection to manage this flow. Although we are focusing on beauty right now, we shouldn't ignore practical matters when they arise. I consider this a temporary fix. We will need to address the town entrance in another episode. We can continue thinking about how our citizens move about and get to work. These walking paths and trees are crucial for an environmentally friendly city. They will improve the sensory experience of both citizens and visitors and reduce the need for polluting traffic. In general, thinking about public spaces is a big part of your city's aesthetics. These open, tree-filled areas are more wild-looking, but carefully manicured public spaces are also important. Let's add some sculpted flowers around the highway interchange using the line tool that came with Detailer's Patch Number 2. This makes a concrete-filled area more aesthetically pleasing and shows that our public spaces are meticulously maintained. When considering the beauty of your town, it can be helpful to include both formally designed areas and those left to look more natural. We can combine the two for the highway interchange using formal flower plantings on the edges and randomly placed trees in the middle. Let's finish off our expansion along the highway with more row houses and then add the green buffer zone. When we zoom out, the various pockets of green are starting to stand out, revealing a cityscape that is more than concrete and steel. We have now covered all of our design aspects and seen how to think about city growth and redevelopment through the lens of function and our data. But we have more to do in this city, particularly when pushing our city's values and style. We want to emphasize that this city values education, the environment, and technology, and show that it is a modern city of the future. To do this, we should add a few more city services we have ignored. The first of these is garbage management. In several places, the garbage is starting to pile up. Since this city is environmentally friendly, let's add a recycling center. We can extend our familiar grid and change the direction again to reflect the coastline. The challenge with this service will be its cost and capacity, so while it is essential, let's monitor it carefully. Let's also unlock large sports parks. These facilities take up significant space, but they provide terrific leisure coverage. A soccer field feels appropriate for our Pacific Northwest community. We will place it between our commercial strip and residences near to our industrial area. We'll then add in more commercial and mixed-use zones around it. A walking trail is an excellent addition near the field. I imagine kids taking a shortcut through the open area. Trees help fill the space and show that we are preserving the environment. Developing small blocks like this checks off many of our design goals. I really like how the urban promenade mixed-use buildings look, creating environmentally friendly green roofs. With the soccer field in place, we have nearly blanketed the city with leisure activity, and our citizens' happiness is substantial. The near end of town, close to the cemetery, looks lush, but we can balance things out on the other side. Let's provide some paths and open areas near our low-rent building to improve general accessibility and reduce traffic. A basketball court keeps folks happy at this end. We will fill in the rest of this block with row houses and then zone some commercial. This balances the city's two sides, helping us better achieve our vision, values, and style. But that one building with pollution still has problems. We can replace another manufacturing building with an office to see if that will do it. Let's take the partial block next to the soccer field and extend our paths. We can then add some zoning, keeping our style guide in mind, some mixed-use urban buildings, a few low-density commercial, North American mixed-use, and some European row houses. We are keeping things eclectic and showing the layers of history. Trees that are mixed deciduous and evergreen fill the spaces. A city scan now shows our design choices and how they all tie together. But we have not satisfied all our values. We said education and technology are critical, so let's build the modern community college. This college can anchor the sizable open piece of land at the far end. This should satisfy our college demand, but notice that we have not yet fulfilled the elementary school needs. We shouldn't wait too long to address this. Adding the athletic complex will increase well-being. We can then add some paths to improve mobility and help students get to class. A quick check of the budget shows that we are doing quite well financially, even with these recent expenditures. But we still haven't beaten back the polluted residents. Let's try removing one more manufacturing building to see if that works. We can continue redeveloping some low-density residential areas by replacing them with row houses and medium-density zones. And remember, we don't have to fill every space. This busy intersection can benefit from a path shortcut, which will help keep cars off the street. And that unlocks Milestone 8, Big Town. We are progressing along nicely. As we build, we're keeping up with our trees and all the little spaces, ensuring Porter is well integrated with nature and enhancing the town's beauty. A check of our data shows that unemployment is low and we do not have many open positions. As our citizens graduate from college, we will help reduce these problems. We should add a small parking building back at the college to ensure plenty of spots. Living around the college is highly coveted and might include a mix of students and faculty. They also have a beautiful open park next to it. But as you can see, traffic is getting backed up with so many people turning left. We can help fix that by removing one of the crosswalks and options for cross traffic and left turns. Let's also add a turn lane to avoid any bottlenecks. It appears we are upholding our environmental values, but we can do more. After all, this town didn't just spring up out of nowhere. Let's plant trees in the empty spaces at the cemetery end, blending the town with the landscape. Some paths by the water will bring residents faster to their manufacturing jobs. I can imagine people walking through the woods and hearing the rippling water. At this point, we want to fill in any small remaining spaces, which doesn't have to involve buildings. Little parks, paths, and trees will do just nicely. We'll surround our community college with trees, making this end of town and the Trumpet Interchange feel naturally integrated. I like seeing the balance in this town. We have focused on the design aspects, making sure it fits within the context, thinking about the history of where it has come from and where it is going, and remembering to embrace the values and style. We have also considered what it would be like to live here, to experience the town, and whether it is pleasing or a slog. If you like natural beauty, this would be a town for you. Returning to our medical clinic, we still have a bottleneck. Perhaps this clinic has a bug. Healthcare is one of our essential items, so let's unlock hospitals to open up more options. To keep with the style, let's place the Urban Medical Center. It looks like a service building of the future and displays the characteristic green roofs we have seen throughout the city. We will remove the clinic and hope that our larger medical center can handle the hospital notifications we have been receiving. Let's then create a buffer zone around the medical center, knowing that people would not want to live right up against it. A path and trees keep our aesthetic in place. Let's add another elementary school to the spot where the clinic used to be, right across from our high school. That should more than cover our needs and keep the school within walking distance for the other side of town. We could have built Porter in many ways, but we focused on providing a general introduction and helping you get started. We covered the essential functions and everything you need to know about data to keep your city working, balance the budget, and manage demand. We also covered the theory and principles of design, which should help keep your cities interesting and unique. I hope you found it helpful. Please hit the like button if you learned any ideas from this, and let me know in the comments if you have feedback or would like to see me address something else in part 2. And I have additional videos for you to watch on my channel.